Thank you all for joining the Low Emission Smart Area Work Group. Super excited for today's discussion and our guest speaker today. For today's work group, we'll be having a discussion on Zeem solutions, so a transportation as a service provider. And Nick Responti has been grateful to join us today. So thanking him, and we'll go ahead and get things moving here. Oh, hold on. So before we dive in, as usual, I want to give some quick reminders and housekeeping for the meeting today. So firstly, as always, is the importance of this being an open discussion amongst all of the work group members. After all, this is meant to be a work group and not a webinar. So although we do share slides and have presenters, the success of this initiative really revolves around the conversations that we have during these meetings. We obviously all bring really diverse experience and perspectives from across the transportation industry, and everybody's input is really essential to the success of deploying these types of pilot solutions and working together towards cleaner, more equitable, and more accessible transportation. So yeah, looking forward to hearing from each of you. And I know most of us already know one another here, but if you could please enter your name and your organization in the chat, that's always helpful for anyone that's recently joined the group. And then please also feel free to jump in at any time, whether that's raising your hand, coming off mute, or adding your comments and questions to the chat. And we have switched to Zoom now instead of Teams. So hopefully that resolves any issues that folks have previously had with turning on their videos. So please, if you're comfortable, it'd be great for us to be able to see and chat with one another, and it'll make the discussion a lot more interactive if you're willing to turn your camera on, especially for the Q&A portion. And then lastly, this meeting is being recorded and will be sent out afterwards to all of the work group participants. So our agenda today will start with, as usual, a quick overview of the LESA initiative, and then we'll circle back to the key challenges that this work group is really meant to address and the goals that we're setting out to accomplish here. I'll quickly touch on the current status of our work group discussions and the upcoming schedule. And then again, grateful to welcome today Nick Responti, Director of Business Development from Zeem Solutions, who will be sharing his insights and their work across the US. And then that will be followed by a Q&A with Nick and an open discussion for the group. So for a quick overview of the LESA initiative, for those that are new to the work group, the main objective really revolves around identifying and adapting solutions that have been piloted in other cities, so we can key in on how best to launch targeted decarbonization, curb management, last mile, and other equitable clean mobility solutions in communities across the state of Colorado. Obviously, as we know, there's a ton of funding opportunities and initiatives that are currently here and are on their way to the state, but there's still really so much that we can learn from other communities and organizations that are piloting some of these initiatives. And the objective of this work group is to learn more about those projects and to see how we can apply those best practices and the available funding here in the state to most efficiently utilize those resources and plan and launch these pilot projects as that funding continues to become available. So some of those examples listed here range from green and zero emission loading zones to smart, flexible, and real-time curb management solutions, e-mobility and micromobility hubs that are connected with existing transit and other travel modes, community charging hubs, EV car, and then even truck share, which we'll be digging into today, and a range of other last mile logistics solutions. And then the LESA project really came about because some of the key challenges that we're facing. So over the last few years, and really compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a ton of stresses added to the use of curb space in communities. Deliveries, as we know, have all skyrocketed. That's introduced more and more diesel trucks and pollution into our communities. And then along with other uses of the curb for TNCs and micromobility, plus an already existing lack of curb space, that's really combining to cause further issues to streetscapes, increasing congestion and safety issues, while then compounding that local air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, and especially continuing to bear a disproportionate impact on those lower income and minority communities by our highway and power corridors. So at the same time, all of these challenges really represent opportunities to deploy some of the innovative solutions that we discuss here in this group with the funding that's currently available and that's on its way. And that's really the key objective of this LESA work group, to serve as a forum for us all to collaborate and to combine all of these solutions into a blueprint that incentivizes those cleaner deliveries, streamlines tracking and efficiency of curb use, improves access to zero emission mobility, and then serves as an economic development opportunity for communities across the state. So on that note, here is the current status of the discussions that we've had to date and our calendar going forward. And as always, we hope that you'll join us for each of these upcoming meetings, with the next one planned for August 24th, where we'll be hearing from the Chief of Staff from Automotus, who previously worked at the Los Angeles Clean Tech Incubator, LESA, on pilot projects, including the deployment of the Santa Monica Zero Emissions Delivery Zone. And then following our October 5th meeting, we'll be circulating a draft blueprint for launching these types of pilot projects that we've been discussing throughout our work group meetings. So with that, grateful to pass it along to Nick from Zeem Solutions, who has graciously joined us today to share the awesome work that they're doing, focused on expanding access to zero emission trucks. And then Nick will go ahead and open it up to Q&A and discussion afterwards.
Great, thank you, Matt. Good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks to Matt, the team, and all the members here for inviting Zeem to speak and participate. Really excited to be here, talk about Zeem, tell you what we're doing and our plans for expansion. We definitely want to get to Colorado and the Denver area, so I'll speak a little bit to that later. But really also want to learn from all of you and see what opportunities are out there where we could work together and collaborate going forward. So again, really excited to be here. My name is Nick Responti, Director of Business Development at Zeem Solutions. Just a quick high-level description of what my team and cross-functional team does at Zeem to accomplish our objectives. We advance business initiatives and stakeholder engagement programs, really to support and increase growth in our existing markets, as well as opportunities for expansion in new markets. And then we also just generally promote Zeem as a premier zero emission fleet as a service provider to continue improving, the company's overall market leading competitive position. So today I'll walk you through a little bit of what Zeem is, why we were created, what problems and barriers we are seeking and continue to seek resolving, and really just the who, what, why, here, how, and when about Zeem. So really look forward to your questions at the end. I'll try and be brief going through the slides. I don't want to be like death by PowerPoint or anything here. If you have any questions, like Matt mentioned, please raise a hand, virtual or on screen, or I'll take your questions at the end in the open discussion portion of the meeting. Try and keep these as informal as possible and act like we're all in a room together. Next slide, please, Matt. So Zeem Solutions, just really quick, this will be the only slide I promise to read. We are transforming the way fleets operate by providing an affordable solution for zero emission transportation that improves air quality within our communities. So there's many new companies or startups out there that like to consider themselves as disruptors. We believe with our experience that the trucking community and fleets have enough natural disruptions that they have to deal with in their day-to-day that we consider ourselves more of really just a proactive facilitator, especially for the small and medium-sized fleets to make that transition to zero emission mobility. Next slide, please, Matt. So there's many companies, there's several companies in this space, whether it's fleet as a service, which we consider ourselves, because as you'll learn, we are very fleet focused. There's truck as a service, transportation as a service, charging as a service, but again, we really focus on the collaborative nature of what we need to accomplish working with fleets, public and private partners like yourselves. So just a basic sense and description of what Zeem does. We build and operate zero emission vehicle depots for class 2B through class 8 electric commercial vehicles. And our general services, we provide leasing, servicing, maintenance, washing, secure parking, charging of the vehicles, lounge space for drivers, and it's at one flat monthly fee. And our value add and our promise when we're working with fleets is it will always be below the total cost of ownership of the diesel equivalent vehicle. Next slide, please, Matt. So why does Zeem exist? Why were we launched and created about 4 years ago? The company began basically as a call center, just reaching out to fleets all over the country, but in several key markets. And we were able to learn about their experiences and what would be their challenges to transition to electric mobility. In that process, we learned a lot of these barriers. So over 95% of trucking in the US is done by small, medium, and independent owner operator fleets. So this massive segment of the market, what we learned will undoubtedly have the most challenges to make that transition to electric mobility. So even with government support and utility support and programs that are coming down, there's still significant barriers for these small, medium fleet operators, whether it be property development, general financing and economics, lack of existing DC fast charging available now if they are actually able to acquire an electric vehicle, getting through the nuances of the regulatory and policy landscape. And really, the list could go on. So why does Zeem exist? To mitigate these barriers and facilitate, as I mentioned before, that transition and enable small fleets to reduce their costs while improving air quality where they operate. Next slide, please, Matt. So our depots are located near major transportation hubs like airports, seaports, major freight corridors, distribution centers, and urban areas, all typically in or near disadvantaged communities. As many of you know, these communities are faced with a disproportionate burden of pollution from transportation, especially related to medium and heavy duty vehicles. Those are facts. We are not allocating any blame to those medium and heavy duty vehicles or their operators. It's an acknowledgement and a mission that we all must collectively work toward accomplishing. So an operational Zeem depot would immediately reduce emissions and improve air quality in the communities where our facilities are located. So these numbers you're looking at right now are from just a general EPA calculator that anybody can access, but it depicts a scenario where our general basic Zeem depot, if it was comprised of 300 vehicles, evenly split between medium and heavy duty, and with an average vehicle miles traveled just across the board. But going forward, and I'll get into our existing operations later, we will be tracking all of our duty cycles of our fleets, the vehicles that are operating at our depots, to get really an exact picture of the positive environmental impact that our depots have going forward. Per vehicle, it'll be an assessment that we can then use, leverage, and learn from going forward as we look to expand. Next slide, please, Matt. This just highlights our general, our basic depot services, as I mentioned earlier: leasing, charging, parking, and maintenance, and then also opportunity charging for the resident Zeem fleets and non-resident fleets. While they're on their duty cycles, when the industry is more mature, if they need a quick top off or fill up when they're on their routes, they can also do that with Zeem on a contract basis. I can get into some additional and ancillary services that we provide later through questions, but in the most basic sense, Matt's fleet or Matt's restaurant linen cleaning service drivers, they drive their personal vehicle to the depot in the morning, they pick up their charge, clean electric truck or van, run their duty cycles, and return their vehicle at the end of the day for us to, charge it for them, make sure our operations staff is charging it appropriately with L2 or DC chargers to keep battery integrity, get a good state of charge, have it ready to go and clean the next day for fleet operators to run their duty cycle. Next slide, please, Matt. So why Zeem works for fleets? We target and engage with fleets within 5 to 10 miles of our depot locations, whether they're already located there or their duty cycles are in those areas. It aligns with how we site and locate our depots in strategic areas that I'll get into more later. But we already covered a lot of the barriers, but in addition to some of the ones I mentioned earlier, just as it relates to what's going on right now, a lot of the supply chain challenges, even procuring vehicles, just limited inventory, the really high purchase price, long infrastructure and permitting associated with these types of chargers. The chargers are very expensive, they could be maintained, software management components, all of these in addition to the other macro level barriers I mentioned earlier are what Zeem takes away in our turnkey bundled offering and solution that we provide for fleets at one price. So we also are very flexible to accommodate fleets' needs. Some may have their own vehicles, and we could just do like a depot agreement with them where they pick and choose certain services that they need from our depots, or again, lease directly through Zeem, and then utilize all those other services that I mentioned earlier. But again, it's important for us to be very flexible with this nascent industry and the transition, and we found fleets to be very receptive of that approach. So while we are certainly all about the environmental components and benefits of this business model and what we do, transitioning to electric mobility, really it needs to pencil out economically for fleets, or they won't convert, certainly prior to any mandates. So even with incentives and subsidies, a lot of these assets are very expensive. So we work with fleets to keep that total cost of ownership below the diesel equivalent. And generally our goal is to facilitate the conversion so fleets can focus doing what they do best, moving goods, people, and services without worrying about all these associated challenges that we acknowledge and that we have experts on staff, and also working with partners throughout the industry to be successful in our application. Next slide, please, Matt. So working with partners and collaboration is really critical. You know, what Matt mentioned in the beginning of the opening comments is really exciting and interesting. We are engaging with stakeholders in all these strategic locations that we're looking to deploy. So we really want to work with partners to accelerate zero emission mobility in new markets and leverage our depots as really centers of technological innovation. You know, it starts with trucks and transportation, but then as we progress together, it develops to really exciting technology, for example, like battery electric storage, V2G or V2X systems, things like mobile power units. We are always looking to collaboratively develop pilot programs to launch innovative local solutions using zero emission vehicles and technologies. And another option, really, we're here to demonstrate, test, and trial the viability of existing equipment and vehicle applications in real world situations. You know, a lot of these OEMs, we're grateful for their work. So I should have mentioned earlier, you know, we're technology agnostic. We work with all the OEMs or the charging manufacturers, really looking for the best product for the fleet operators. You know, so we present ourselves and are advocates for fleet operators. You know, if there is an OEM saying, okay, this vehicle gets a 300-mile range, well, did we consider the duty cycle? Did we consider the weather, the payload, the grade? You know, all this stuff that needs to be taken into consideration, that we are working with our fleets when we're doing really, you know, when we engage with fleets, it's almost like we conduct an audit of their operations to understand the finances, the duty cycle, so we can really nail down and get a good sense of how they're operating and how we could align them with the right vehicle, the right electric vehicle to fit their needs and their duty cycles. Another very important for us is just, as I mentioned, collaboration and cooperation with both the public and private sector stakeholders to accomplish mutual emissions reduction objectives, air quality improvement, economic development, job creation, and community engagement objectives. You know, I'm on the business development team here, but actually when I started, I was on the policy and market development team. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, we work across the board, cross-functional, and anywhere where our depots are located is important for us to, you know, get in there with the local community, the local officials. Workforce development is key. This industry is new. We all acknowledge that. We need to work together to develop a pipeline of a workforce that can sustain and really grow into the clean energy economy. So, you know, this transition that we're all talking about and we're all a part of and excited to be a part of, it's going to be challenging, and it's important, as Matt mentioned earlier, that we leverage our collective experience and shared expertise for this industry's success. So, you know, that Zeem is here to be a partner where we deploy and we are excited to engage with all the stakeholders involved in this mission. Next slide, please, Matt. So what's exciting about Zeem is we actually have, steel in the ground and operational depots near Los Angeles International Airport in Englewood, California. We have two facilities. We consider it one depot because they make up about approximately 3 acres. So we started in December of 2021 with fleet operators using our depot and our services that I mentioned earlier. And as we build out, we are going to be the largest collection of DCFCs in this area. Right now we have 12 DCFC ports, and we are building out to be fully operational and at complete build out early 2023. So as of now, there is parking space, wash bay, office space, and break room amenities. And we also have, 80 electric vehicle assets with more on the way across every vehicle class. So we're excited about that. And, some of our customers are already using people movers, last mile delivery, cargo vans, things like that. So we are beyond, the proof of concept stage, and we're phasing in customers in alignment with our existing capacity. Next slide, please. This is just a quick snapshot of what we have available and then what will be at these two sites, which again, we consider one depot, the LAX branch. We're going to have 77 fast charging ports, almost 10 megawatts of power. So as I mentioned earlier, that's a lot of power on a site. It's very important that we also use these for more than transportation. These depots are hubs of innovative technological mobility options, and we can use them as workforce development training classrooms, essentially. So, take advantage of this infrastructure that we're building out in these key locations. Next slide, please, Matt. So public policy really is key, again, to this nascent industry, very, very important. So as we look to deploy in other markets and states, we certainly do so in those states that have favorable policy and political landscapes for zero emission mobility, notably California, we all know about, but Colorado is making great strides, as well as New Jersey and New York, Washington, Oregon. So we're really excited to be looking at all those strategic areas. But the incentives that support this industry mainly fit into like 4 or 5 buckets. First and foremost, mandates to adopt new technology and phase out old technology. Just the point of sale vehicle voucher incentives, infrastructure subsidies, clean fuel standard programs, and then just grants for pilot and innovative projects. So we work with the local policymakers and the regulators to understand these programs, really help the fleet customers get access to these grants. In California, we have experience with HVIP and Charge Ready, with SCE, the utility in Southern California near our depots, where that covers the territory where our depots are located. So it's really important that we learn these programs, work with other states in these new markets to learn from what we've done in California, improve. I'm excited to read and hear that Colorado is launching vehicle incentives that are tied to infrastructure incentives, not just from the utility side, which are valuable and important. So, that seems to be very exciting. Also, it's critical that states or policymakers consider like the value of high asset utilization for this infrastructure and these vehicles, because that's ultimately the purpose. We don't want assets that aren't being utilized when they're taking in public dollars. We really want to get the best return on that investment. I can speak all morning or afternoon about incentives, so I'll move on there. But this is critical for us. So again, we look at these states. This isn't the only driver of our expansion plan, but it is a leading driver. Next slide, please, Matt. So we recently, Zeem recently closed a capital commitment to secure and facilitate our growth, where we're looking to build out these depots in locations throughout the country in the states that I mentioned, but we also have other opportunities in the South Atlantic that are coming to fruition as well. And our goals are to work with the stakeholders to make this happen. And unfortunately, the team and I were supposed to be in Denver last week looking at sites, but something came up, there was a conflict, and we couldn't get out there, but we're going to do that soon. It'll probably be after summer. So we are already looking at sites in the Denver metro area that I personally need to learn and excited to learn more about and get out there and see the area firsthand and understand the transportation network and meet with, the partners and stakeholders in that area so we can, be successful collectively, but we're really excited to do that. So our goals are to have 10 additional depot facilities across the country over the next 12 months. Obviously, wouldn't be fully operational, but at least under a lease or purchase and starting to build out so we can expand and help facilitate this transition to zero emission mobility. Next slide, please. So I'm going to conclude there. Again, I wanted to be brief. That was a lot in a short amount of time, but really grateful for this opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions. Like I said, look forward to an open dialogue and really just a continued partnership with everybody on this work group. Excited to be invited, and I am planning to attend the Fall Drive Clean Connection event in October. So really excited to meet some of you folks in person then. So thank you, Matt, and thank you all for your time.
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Nick. I'll let everyone kind of jump in to see if anybody's got any questions off the bat.
Yeah, I have a quick one. On those Class 8 Volvo semis, do you guys already have those?
On order. One we're getting really soon. Actually, we are getting one really soon, and you will see the announcement associated with that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah. So look, that's a key question. I mean, I'll elaborate on that, Ronaldo. So thanks for asking that. Right. We all know about the supply chain challenges across the board, not just in our industry, literally in everything, but even with diesel vehicles too. So we work with the OEMs to plan ahead with our purchase orders, but as you build out facilities, that certainly takes time in terms of property development and land use planning and management and infrastructure installation, that we can align those timeframes nicely as we bring on customers too. But you're going to see some announcements in the short term about other Class 8 OEMs working with Zeem as well. But again, good question. Certainly a challenge that we all need to work together on with the OEMs and fleet operators to resolve.
Do all of the vehicles need to be returned back to the depot, or can they be left throughout the city?
Another good question. So if it is, the resident Zeem vehicles that we own and lease out to operators, it would be expected that they do return them to the depot. But as I mentioned before, there could be some situations where, there's a fleet operator that owns these vehicles themselves and they want to take advantage of depot services. They can modify that agreement to be a little bit more flexible in their operations, where they can have their own home base facility. We also have, I didn't want to get into this, I put it in the appendix and then we shared around, but a co-location model that we could work with some of the larger companies that are starting to do this themselves, where we would build out their facility and on one side of the property, and then also maybe a micro Zeem depot on the other side, or also a product and service that we call home base, where we can install charging at or really provide a white glove service to install charging at an operating facility within close proximity to the depot, where they complement each other in their operations, and it gives fleet operators some flexibility in their approach.
Last one from me. You spoke about some of the supply chain issues on the vehicle side. What's like your biggest pain point when you're moving into a new market, or difficulty?
I'd say it varies. right? So power availability is one of them. It's something that we need to consider when we're looking for sites in any market. So they're very different. Some are different than others. That's the first one, right? We're not going to consider a site if, you know, a lot of them don't have the power we need to initiate or launch. But, you know, when we get that timeline working with the utility, if it's going to take too long lead time, that's not going to be, you know, advantageous for us to deploy there, again, unless it aligns nicely, and we'll take really a systematic approach when we do this with vehicle availability and when fleets are ready to make this transition. But I'd say power availability, just property in these very competitive markets, you know, in the transportation space, you know, these markets near the assets that I mentioned earlier, airports, seaports, key freight corridors, distribution centers, urban areas, definitely really competitive. Still, maybe they're not calling it white hot anymore, but I think it's red hot still, or in between white and red. I have no idea, but it's very competitive. So I'd say those are, you know, two gating issues on the property side, and you know, you can't do much more unless you get that property going.
Thank you. Actually, one more last one for me. There are you know, a few other you know, car sharing, truck sharing, fleet sharing companies. What would you just say your value add is, or what really sets you apart from those other companies?
That's a great question, and you know, I would answer that with mainly our fleet focus, as I mentioned earlier, and really understanding the transportation side of the business. A lot of these other companies are focusing on the technology side or the software side, or they consider them a tech startup. We are a transportation and operational company, and we have experts that have been in trucking and transportation, distributed energy, and policy, regulatory incentives, and nuances that, you know, these fleet operators typically don't want to have anything to do with. So we are very fleet focused, so customer focused on the operational side, and then we focus on all the vehicle classes. Some of the other customers are focused on the heavy duty side, or maybe the smaller transportation network companies. We are, you know, comprehensive in our approach in these depot facilities. You know, you can charge a class 8 with a DCFC, you can charge a class 4 box truck. You know, these facilities will be open to all fleet operators. Great question.
So I wanted to throw a question out as well. In terms of, you know, we've got folks from Northern Colorado, from City and County of Denver, Inglewood, Louisville, Vail. You know, I think you maybe touched on it a little bit, but if you could kind of dive into, I know, you know, when I think of Zeem generally, I tend to think of a big 3-acre facility, but the different kind of business models that are available, you know, maybe in City and County of Denver, but then also beyond that in some of these smaller communities. And also a lot of the work in Colorado is going to be focusing on municipal fleets that are transitioning to electric vehicles and medium and heavy duty vehicles in particular. So whether that's something that Zeem is involved in working with municipal fleets as well, besides just individual organizations.
Absolutely. Matt, great question about working with, you know, I touched on it earlier, just, you know, our approach to work with public stakeholders or government as well. I don't know if these municipalities would want me to list their names now, but we are working with several in California, also in other locations, to explore these opportunities, whether it's with our existing facilities and vehicles. I think I can narrow it down for you on where we are located now, but also in other prospective locations. We see that as a great and exciting market to collaborate with, and perhaps an entity that will be able to do it sooner because of the government support. And they're going to need municipalities or transit agencies or other government departments are also going to need the support and the services that Zeem provides to do this. And I think pilot programs are a great approach to work out solutions together. And, you know, like I said, your point, 3 acres. We're really flexible in that. That would be probably the sweet spot for a depot. But part of what we do when we deploy is phasing in and phasing up with either the property owners where we're located or other partners working together. So that the model is purposely flexible to account for needs, interests, challenges in certain markets, but absolutely critical to work with public stakeholders. And I think that provides a great opportunity for growth, really in the short term.
All right, and then I wanted to make sure to call it out to everybody. Does anybody else have any key questions to dive into? Mike, Jay, I know we've been talking about the potential for truck share and this type of solution in city and county of Denver. I guess I'm curious to hear, whether this seems like a solution that might be a good possibility, or if there's like existing challenges or other impediments, next steps that you might have in mind when it comes to putting in place something like this in the Denver region.
Real quickly, just from the city of Denver perspective, others can certainly weigh in. I think just a question of where we would locate something like this. If it's on city property, like that kind of creates a whole other set of interesting challenges and procurement issues we'd have to work through. But certainly, the concept is something I'd love to be able to figure out how we can support. Because I think, trying to figure out how we do this truck share, the larger vehicle sharing, and the depots to support them, something I think we'd like to figure out how we can do.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to dive in more with you offline to learn about your plans and how we can work together on that. I totally appreciate and understand the concerns and the consideration associated with being a municipality. I come from, prior to this, I worked for a very large public transportation agency, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. So totally get the government side. And one of my main roles there was government community relations, working with other public entities in the region on big infrastructure projects. A lot more than that, but the Port Authority builds a lot of transportation infrastructure and operates a lot of transportation infrastructure. So totally understand those challenges, and similar to what Zeem looks to accomplish is, I use this word a lot, but it's true. We have to collaborate. For those that say, oh, this transition is going to be easy, we just all need to work together. It's not. We need to acknowledge the facts. It's going to be challenging, but working together is critical to do that. So if there's property that the city of Denver has in mind, we're happy to take a look. And like I said, there's that co-locate model, or it doesn't need to be a 3 to 5 acre site off the bat. It can focus on an area or your use cases, and the city of Denver on one side with Zeem support, operational support, Zeem on the other side. There's a lot of options we could consider or work on, or just develop new concepts as well. We're not going to just stay in a vacuum on our deployment strategy. That's really exciting. I'm very happy to learn more. And I just generally need to learn more about the transportation network in and around Denver. We certainly have a Colorado expert on our team, but I also want to learn more. So looking forward to the opportunity to do that.
Carrie, I see you've got a hand up.
Hi. Sorry about that. Good morning, everybody. Nick, and just for others on the call, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of the community access enterprise housed here within the Colorado Energy Office. I saw Phil's note about the Clean Fleet Enterprise at CDPHE. And so as we are standing up these new enterprises with our new sources of funding, certainly incentivizing through the Clean Fleet Enterprise, the acquisition of EVs for medium and heavy duty is important. And then the Community Access Enterprise will be focusing on the charging infrastructure. So those are two new entities with new sources of funding. available for medium and heavy duty electrification. I'll put in the chat the link for the community access enterprise. We do intend to be launching a medium and heavy duty targeted infrastructure program over the course of this current fiscal year, which takes us through next June. So be sure to keep an eye on the community access enterprise. We'll be updating our website, sending out updates on all of that. And so just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of those opportunities as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks so much for calling that out and noting those amazing programs on the way, Carrie. Just to touch on it as well, obviously we've got Drive Clean Colorado on the call. We've got Northern Colorado Clean Cities on the call. The other recharge coaches across the state that can support some of that work in terms of being able to coordinate the infrastructure funding combined with CDPHE from the Clean Fleet Enterprise for the vehicles themselves. And then really, I think that there's that big gap that, Nick has been speaking to when it comes to obviously the UPSs, the FedExes, the Amazons. They've got some of the capacity and the funding available to be able to deploy some of these zero emission trucks. But, that 95% number when it comes to looking at independent owner operators is a huge impediment and challenge when it comes to electrifying zero emission trucks. So thinking about the amount of funding that they need in order to move forward, and then the risk coming with immediately deploying some zero emission trucks and some of the difficulties that might come along with that, the opportunity to then be able to have a number of businesses and organizations and municipalities be able to trial some of these solutions, I think is really essential. So, Nick, it's been great to hear kind of all of those details. I would be curious, touching on thinking about the deployment of one of these solutions in a Denver and another region in Northern Colorado, the Western Slope. How do you look at when it comes to starting up engagement with some of the fleets and the businesses in the area? What kind of perspectives have you learned from some of those conversations that you've had? And I guess just kind of hearing out those next steps when it comes to thinking about long-term leases, shorter-term leases, different trials, if folks can use like a Class 3 vehicle and then also use a Class 7 vehicle, just flexibility in those different engagement conversations.
That's a really good question, Matt. And I didn't put this slide up in the initial deck. Again, wanted to be as brief as possible. There's a lot to cover, but it's in the appendix, which is only 3 other slides, but that could have been like 15 more minutes. Anyway, it's about our customer database. And really that's the way this company started was, essentially a call center reaching out to fleets all over the country in these markets. Mainly it was California, New York, New Jersey, Colorado, and other areas have stepped up more since we're really looking to expand further. So that's, the old school, picking up the phone, reaching out to fleets, asking, a set of questions, what they have in their fleet now, what their duty cycle is. Are they interested in electrification? Will they be ready for it if it's in a location when this stuff needs to happen? Do they want to take advantage of incentives? Where do they operate? really all these questions where we can aggregate that data that helps us develop our outreach and engagement strategy. But then, other than the call center, it's just we do have experienced teammates that have a lot of fleet operator connections, going to events, attending forums, working with trucking associations or other industry associations to spread the word and reach out to customers. So it's a multi-stage strategy, but it really started with that very detailed and comprehensive proprietary customer database that started Zeem and helped us build this product and these services, and also guides where we will be located. So I explained earlier that the policy and political landscape is a strong driver, but also the aggregation of these qualified fleets in these areas is a strong driver of where we're going to look to expand, as well as some channel partner opportunities in other regions. But we look at a location, we say these incentives are coming down, or we hear these incentives are coming down. We have this amount of customers there. We start re-engaging with them to get their timeline, see if they're interested. and really just make that systematic approach in as we're looking at properties, speaking to developers, engaging with utilities, entities and stakeholders like yourself. So it's really a comprehensive and systematic approach.
Kayla, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question for you. I see on your website that it says that you're looking into energy storage with Zeem. And so I'm just wondering if any of your vehicles have V2G capability, or if you've done any research on vehicle to grid capabilities with your fleet and your options that you have.
Okay, so that's a great question. And I think, Matt, I need to include those three. I think my lesson learned here is I need to include those 3 slides in the appendix in the main deck. Because the one other slide just included like additional products and services. And one of those, or several of those being, V2G or V2X. And we're actually part of there you go, thank you, additional product offering. We're actually part of the US DOE coalition MOU out of Southern California, specifically working on V2G technology and using our vehicle assets to help do that with stakeholders in Southern California, government side, utility side, the Energy Commission. So I'm not the expert, certainly, or I'm never going to pretend to be that expert on the battery technology side, but we do have battery technology experts that are leading that, and it's something that's very important to us because working with I should say municipalities, provide resiliency, load management, peak management with the grid. So great opportunities that we are looking into across the board. Demand response as we have listed here, and then another component, is deploying the second life batteries that we have here. That's very important. You can ask pretty much every OEM. It's like, what do you believe the resale value of these vehicles are going to be? And you get different answers, but that's critical to these assets. And whether it's recycling or continuing to utilize these vehicles further, or again deploying these batteries in other applications at our depots to manage load and store energy and reduce emissions, we're looking into all of that.
Yeah, and I think to add to that thought, obviously resilience is a huge component that we're looking towards in Colorado. We've got wildfires. Thankfully, this summer has been more precipitation, so it's something that we haven't had to deal with as much. But we have a number of patchwork puzzle of utilities as well. And we think about Xcel Energy, which obviously has a ton of incentives available, and Black Hills Energy, which has some incentives too. But ultimately, when we think about some of the other patchwork utilities, municipal utilities, co-ops, it's really key to be able to have some of that on-site storage and distributed energy resources, because ultimately they may not be able to install the types of power capabilities that are needed to get something like this moving. And then obviously in terms of also looking at just being able to utilize the grid more efficiently, and potentially have a location for emergency services. I think that's a consideration that these depots could potentially be utilized for on a more case-by-case basis. I'm not sure if that's something that's been considered, but just kind of adding to there. I'm glad that V2G is something that's being looked into, and to me, it's a really essential pilot project. That's a possibility. So definitely, we don't have Xcel or some of the utilities on this call because they couldn't make it today, but I think that's a key conversation to have going forward. And Mel, you wanted to jump in with a question as well?
Yeah, Nicholas, thank you so much for your presentation. I had one question I saw on the screen that said workforce training. When you all come into a community, is hiring local workforce individuals, is that a priority, or can you kind of walk through that a little bit?
Yes, great question. I appreciate that. And we could do a whole presentation on workforce development because it's critical. And to answer that question directly, anywhere we're locating, for example, we are right now, our 2 facilities are located in the city of Englewood. So we are working with the city. We have engaged with the city, looking into opportunities, hiring, staff that is representative of the communities where we're located. That's a primary goal. But it is also critical to work with other partners there. We need to train these individuals on charging station maintenance as well as the vehicle maintenance. We're certainly not going to be experts in like curriculum development, so you need to work with academia as well, or other organizations that are doing this. So we definitely want to leverage those relationships and use these depots to do that together. So it's important to bring in local government, academia, state government programs, grant funding when it's available. So yeah, that's critical. And for example, we have a partnership with Ørsted, the offshore wind developer in the state of New Jersey, to develop a depot near the port of New York and New Jersey. I think you can all realize now it's my connection, or at least my initial introduction into Zeem. But a part of that partnership is they're helping to support not only us to deploy Class 8 tractors that'll operate at the New Jersey facilities in the port of New York and New Jersey, but also a workforce development initiative with the local communities and a battery electric storage system at that depot. And that's just one partnership that's going to help us deploy a little sooner in a state like New Jersey, which their incentives are growing and getting better, I should say. But that partnership is critical to that growth, and then also that type of look and lens, or how we prospect what we could do at a depot. That, like, those weren't their ideas; those were Zeem's ideas, and they were happy to support that. And they used Zeem in their application with the Public Utility Commission for this offshore wind bid, really as a differentiator to help reduce emissions in environmental justice communities near the port. So yeah, that's critical. And again, we will have to really rely on those relationships with partners to be successful there. Because we're not experts in curriculum development or anything like that, but on the vehicle side, the transportation side, working with the OEMs on the maintenance, and then also reaching out for the management staff too. It doesn't just have to be the operations and facility staff. It's across the board, and it's important to have local representation at our facility.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mel, for that question too. I mean, workforce development is such an essential consideration here in Colorado. And Nick, just so you know, the Department of Transportation here, some of the community colleges are all pretty deeply involved in looking at workforce development opportunities. There's going to be a considerate transition. We talk about a just transition for coal workers. I think that it's something that we have to consider for ICE, maintenance workers as well. And I know you mentioned briefly in your presentation that there's the possibility of, for instance, maybe partnering with like some community colleges or CDOT and some of these municipal fleets to have folks be able to look at the depot and get a feel for some of that maintenance considerations and different technical training. So, I'm not sure. It sounds like that's something that Zeem has looked into as a possibility.
Yeah, we absolutely, I alluded to earlier, we consider these facilities like clean energy classrooms for the growing clean energy economy. We're all learning together, and having, a right-sized workforce for the future is important, and not leaving, others behind that take advantage of the existing skill sets, work together. These are good, clean energy, good paying clean energy jobs that are transferable. If you can provide technical work on a charger, you can do that on a vehicle. You can operate a facility that's charging and housing these types of zero emission vehicles. So you take a really a holistic approach in learning and growing together on that. And we will need the support of other partners to do that successfully. So yeah, happy to offer the depot up as a facility to learn and develop and showcase what could be done in this space.
Great. Well, I know we're getting to time here. As a last question, I guess relatively quickly, if always like to ask, if you have any specific tips or recommendations or kind of lessons learned that you'd like to pass along for us to consider here in Colorado before we close out. Sure.
So I think lessons learned on the policy side, if if you all paid attention to some of the news with CARB and the HVIP program, they're soon to be launching ISEF. So it's focused on, small fleets. Historically there, that vehicle voucher incentive program was pretty much all snapped up by larger fleets. Anytime it would be opened, then that access was pretty much denied to small fleet operators. So I think that is critical as you develop incentive programs. Keep in mind the small fleets, and then also like selfishly, but this is important, the transportation as a service providers were locked out of a program like HVIP. There was collaborative ways to work around it and get access with fleets and working really directly with CARB. But we are an aggregator of fleets. We can help share that funding to fleet operators to reduce costs overall. So they definitely don't want to block as a service providers across the board, not just Zeem, others as well. That's very important. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, I don't think any areas are doing this, but tying it to asset utilization is important, because you might be able to get these vehicles, but deploying them and using them, and maybe it's a scaled incentive structure that has operational or performance metrics associated, not just operating for 3 years in a certain area that's gathered by telematic information or geotab technology, stuff like that, but really using these assets that government money was deployed to support.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Nick, again, for joining today, for sharing your expertise with us. Thanks everybody for some great questions as well. Definitely looking forward to keeping this conversation going as we continue to take next steps here in Colorado and more of that funding becomes available. Hopefully circle back around, Nick, in terms of your opportunities here in the state. And yeah, just want to thank everybody for attending today. Definitely reach out if you'd like to discuss this in more depth, or if you have any other questions. My email is matt@drivecleanco.org, which I can put in the chat now. And then in terms of next steps, our next meeting again is planned for August 24th. I'll send a follow-up email with the recording and make sure to keep you all updated. And yeah, wishing everybody a great week. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you all.
Bye, everybody.